Hello again, welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, a really warm welcome. This is a place where we talk about different spiritual movements and religious history. So if you're interested in those topics, I hope you'll look at some of the playlists and the things that are on offer for you about all kinds of religions and religious movements. Today I'm taking information from a blog that is a companion piece to something I uploaded a couple of weeks ago, and that was about the basics of the Fundamentalist movement. Now this is a blog by Cait West, and I believe that that is a pen name for the owner of this blog, and it tells some of the life story. This particular article is how to know you're in a Christian fundamentalist church. And so I'm going to put a link in the description box to this article so you can find this blog and read it for yourself. But it says, the author begins by saying, if you're like me and you grew up under Christian fundamentalism teaching, then you probably know the Bible backward and forward, never dated, and you were told that Democrats are demonic and Halloween is Satan's holiday. And maybe, like me, since you've grown up and learned a lot about the world outside of the church, talked with people from different backgrounds, and looked at the Bible with fresh eyes and lots of questions, you might be deconstructing or reconstructing your faith, finding real freedom in the escape from legalism. And in addition, my words now, it may be that you are in a fundamentalist church and are questioning whether that's the right place for you. So the author goes on, so I've been thinking about signs or red flags that warn me that fundamentalism is in play in a church. And I hope my laying these things out here might be helpful. And so the first sign that the church that you're in might be fundamentalist is a fear-based outlook or theology. Fundamentalism thrives on fear. Fear of losing our children, or losing our religious liberty, or just being wrong and going to hell. In the fundamentalist movement, you have to have your doctrine right for the Lord to accept you. But the problem with fundamentalist fear is that it breeds exclusion and isolation. So if your pastor or your church is focusing more on what to be afraid of, then you might be in a fundamentalist church. If a teaching suggests moving to a more conservative county or state, or if it's popular in your church to move to a rural area, buy a lot of land and start building houses for your children and fellow church members, then you're in a fundamentalist church or possibly a cult. The second red flag is the mentality of us against them. If the rhetoric of preaching sounds like they hate Christians, they want our children, then you are probably in a fundamentalist church. Sometimes they is submitted for the world or the culture. It's never very specific. It's just that others are anti-Christian, anti-family, anti-values, and we have to stand against them. It's us against them. And there's also a persecution complex. Nothing quite compares to the cognitive dissonance of sitting in churches in the affluence of white American suburbia and hearing from the pulpit a call not to be afraid of persecution or prayers for God to stop persecution. Certainly, some Christians in the world are experiencing religious persecution, and they need our prayers. But for the most part, white evangelicals in America are not experiencing persecution. Legalism is the next red flag. Fundamentalist churches are usually legalistic, that is, putting the law above grace and relationships. Legalism emphasizes the good works you do over the work of Christ, instilling a sense of never being good enough. Legalistic churches have many rules, including what to wear, how to date, who you can be friends with, what movies you can watch. Now, these rules are outside of biblical teaching, but fundamentalist pastors may speak as if these rules are on the same level with Scripture. If your church thinks that you are the only right way, fundamentalists want to be right. They like to believe that they're secure in their faith and in how they live and in how they raise their children. And the author says that I should know, I used to be one. But this desire to be right can lead to pride and false assurance, as well as add a burden to people who aren't given the liberty to make these decisions for themselves. If your pastor is saying to take your kids out of public school and only send them to a Christian school or start homeschooling, you might be in a fundamentalist church. And if the church only tolerates one perspective, one political party, one Bible translation, one hymnal, one type of musical instrument, then you might be in a fundamentalist church. My words now, how very restrictive this all sounds. Superiority. If your church prides itself on being better than unbelievers or even better than other denominations of Christians, you might be in a fundamentalist church. Sexism. Fundamentalism is usually tied to patriarchy, or the belief, to put it simply, that men are leaders and the ones with authority, while women are to live in submission to men. Distinct gender roles are taught in fundamentalist churches. For instance, women are to be meek wives and mothers and keepers of the home, and men are to be breadwinners and the heads of the household. And if you're a girl growing up under this doctrine, you start to see yourself as valuable only in relation to men. Only valuable if you're quiet and submissive and homebound. In these churches, women are not given any positions of authority, and therefore they can become victims of abuse with no help from the church. Historically, fundamentalism has a connection with racism. An example would be the Fundamentalist College, Bob Jones University. Today, racism in church might be less obvious, but white supremacy still thrives. Fundamentalist churches may not sound racist, but they often fail to work against racism and white supremacy. And some fundamentalists are unafraid to defend Southern slavery. And finally, there's spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse in a church setting means creating a toxic culture where within the church or the group, by shaming or controlling members using the power of leadership positions. If leaders in the church leverage their position of authority to coerce certain behavior, that's spiritual abuse. If they use the Bible as a weapon to control and manipulate congregants, that is spiritual abuse. Pastors are to be servants in the church, leading in humility and compassion. They are not God to judge, and they should never attempt to control people's lives. As I said, these are not my words. This is the writing and the opinions of Cait West in this blog. However, the red flags certainly are appropriate. If you are part of a fundamentalist church and you're happy with it, this is not a call for you to leave your church and go somewhere else. It is just a call to have eyes open and be aware of the diversity of Christianity, that not all churches promote these ideas or think this way. And if you struggle at all with being in such a church, I recommend that you get further information and further assistance from outside of the church. Well, this video was a little bit different. I usually don't do a book study or read other people's words, but I hope you have found it informative and you have seen another point of view from someone other than myself about fundamentalism, and I hope you'll check out this blog. And I will be back again soon. As always, I hope you have good health and are prosperous, and I'll see you real soon. Bye for now.